Mr Chair, I'm pleased to take a call in the Part 1 debate on the Vulnerable Children Bill, which was actually a very civilised debate until the Minister got up on her feet and actually attacked our spokesperson for children for daring to raise the issue of child poverty and the need to deal with that in this country. And I want to put it on record for the Labour Party that we support this bill. We support this bill and therefore did not deserve that unwarranted attack. But doesn't it tell the country everything they need to know about how much this government despises people who haven't got the needs to get by and don't want to debate those issues? Because I think that was a disgraceful performance by the Minister to attack an opposition spokesperson for daring to raise the issue that while we support this bill, we wish that it went an awful lot further, and we do. And I think that's right and proper for the debate in this House, and I regret that the Minister went on the attack, because it should be a civilised debate. It should be a civilised debate, Mr Sabin, when we talk about children and their needs. Pardon? Pardon? Oh, I'm not to stand here and talk about poverty, says another one of the government MPs on the government benches. Well, here we go. Here we go. This is a debating chamber on behalf of all of the people of New Zealand, and the Labour Party will talk about the needs of all of the people of New Zealand, not just your rich mates in your cabinet club, Mr Sabin, because that is what we are here to bring to this debating chamber. And please do not tell me that I'm not to get up and speak about child poverty in this House. I know it harms you to hear it because it is your government's track record, but please, Mr Sabin, do not try and shut down debate about an issue that is very important to this country and certainly very important to people who are listening to this debate, because they will recognise, even if the national government doesn't, that we have growing inequality in this country, and going into denial about that, as the Minister did when she spoke, is not going to address those very real issues. And yet we stand here supporting the Minister's bill. That's right, Minister, supporting your bill, because this is an area that we do want to see progress on. And Mr Sabin's still yelling and bellowing because he doesn't want to understand that we are ambitious to actually get a whole range of other issues dealt with when it comes to vulnerable children. But Mr Sabin, I do want to speak about one particular part of this bill, and that is the part that the Minister actually did rise and speak in a civilised manner about, and that is the issue about volunteers. Because I do think that while the government, I'm sure, did think about this very seriously, I think they need to actually think about it even more seriously. Because the reality is that the statistics tell us that, sadly, it is more often people in the unpaid workforce who are guilty of abusing vulnerable children than it is the people in the paid workforce. And the Minister talks about the 375,000 people that will need to be vetted under this bill who are in the paid workforce. Well, that's useful, but all the evidence tells us that the more likely problem is in the part that will go unvetted under this bill. And I do think that's a really serious issue. If we are serious about addressing the needs of vulnerable children, then we do absolutely need to take that on board, and I don't think the government has given that enough consideration. And so we'll be pleased to support the amendments coming forward on this bill attempting to address that. Mr Chair, I was very saddened to read in the weekend a case of a carer for child, youth and family who had been found guilty of abusing children in his care, and the very difficult situation that the family had to address that situation, and in fact had great difficulty finding out that this had even happened. They had great difficulty finding out that it happened and therefore what steps could be taken to protect their children who were in the care of child, youth and family. The reason why I raise that in the context of this debate, Mr Chair, is because, because the checks and the vetting that are required by this bill had taken place in that case. And so I think we need to be really clear that some of what is proposed in this bill happens already and has happened for quite some time in a number of these government departments and have failed to keep children safe. So we should be under no false illusion that the bill that we are passing, or that we are passing through its committee stages this evening, will be the silver bullet that addresses vulnerable children who are vulnerable to being abused by adults whose care they are placed in. So we have children who in that case were required, not just chose to be in the care of that adult, but were required to be in the care of that adult. And these checks, these vetting and police checks, didn't keep those children safe. And I think it's sobering for all of us to know that this law, while making some steps, will not prevent these situations. And certainly, it quite deliberately, as the Minister just described before, will not prevent these situations happening in a situation where the adult in charge of that child is in a volunteer role. And as I said at the outset of my contribution to this debate, actually it wasn't quite at the outset, I had some things to say about the tenor of the Minister's debate, but shortly after that referred to the fact that it is more often people in volunteer situations who take advantage of vulnerable children than it is people in the paid workforce. And so I do think that there are things that we need to consider in doing this. My colleague Jacinda Ardern spoke, I thought, very thoughtfully and without controversy about the need for a children's plan, because this part of the bill brings into place a vulnerable children's plan. And my colleague was quite rightfully pointing out that if it was dealing with the needs of the vulnerable children of this country, it would also deal with the issues of poverty, that it would also recognise that children living in poverty are vulnerable as well, and that it would take steps, as the Children's Commissioner has asked for it to do, to address those needs. I don't think that's something that should invite a tirade from the sponsoring minister. I think that is something that should be genuinely and in a civilised manner, for the sake of the children, debated in this House. And, Mr Chair, it is the intention of the New Zealand Labour Party to ensure that those voices are heard, as well as the voices that have been heard through the Minister's process that was carefully harnessed through a green paper and a white paper. I'm not sure if it was in that order. It might have been the white paper first and the green paper. I get confused about which ones come first. But there was a very carefully managed process, and I congratulate the Minister on it. But a lot of the people who made submissions to that process, in fact, said exactly the things that Jacinda Ardern just articulated on their behalf. She just articulated those very things on their behalf around the importance of understanding that children were vulnerable when they were placed in poverty. When they were placed in poverty because of the policies being pursued by this government. And I think that is very right to raise those issues. They don't deserve to have their views being articulated by my colleague face a tirade from the Minister. And I hope that she will take a different approach to the debate for the rest of this, the committee stages on part one, because we certainly, and I think the government members, I hope they'll take some calls on this as well from the Social Services Select Committee, will acknowledge that the role of the Labour Party, and I think all members on the Select Committee, was a very proactive and positive role in terms of trying to get the best possible solution to this bill. It was the opposition members who ensured that the child harm protection orders were taken out of this bill because they were going to be unworkable. That wasn't argued by the government members on the Select Committee. That was a really valuable contribution, finally picked up by the Minister, from the opposition members on the Select Committee. So I think it is important that all the voices on these issues are heard, that there is no attempt by the government to shut debate down, because we are talking about the needs of children, and I think we ought to do that, Mr Chair, in a civilised manner.
Mr Chair,
and I welcome the opportunity